Some big news coming out of the European Union. So, the European Parliament just approved basically what amounts to a mass surveillance of private communications bill. So, they've cloaked it as governments always do in, we're protecting children and all of this. But essentially, what this boils down to is that companies will be able to scan private contents of emails, messages, and all of that. And then there's speculation that come September, they're going to be revising this even further, and then applications that don't have access to messages may be required to put in backdoors. And this is interesting coming out of the EU. It is a divergence from their GDPR policies that they've had, where they've had a pretty good stance on privacy, and this sort of rolls back some of that stuff. Apparently, this stuff was all enabled up until like the end of 2020, and then something sunsetted, and companies could no longer do this. So they basically putting through this bill in order to reinstate this ability for companies. And it's not unlike some bills in Congress in America at the moment. We have the Earn It bill, which is basically mimics this bill in its entirety, and also the Lawful Access to Encrypted Data Act. So much going on here with regards to mass surveillance and the right to privacy and all of that. I'm going to throw this to the group, then maybe we can dig into some of the details of the bill. Just your thoughts on the direction that we're going in. Total financial surveillance, total communications surveillance. It's getting to become this very uncomfortable situation. Will, I'm going to throw this to you first. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, totally agree with you. There's just some bills that have been kind of put out over the last year, which are pretty startling. And I think a lot of this just kind of comes out of the pandemic, where it's just a totally different political landscape than it was a year and a half ago. A lot of political mentalities have been changed. And now we're seeing some of that come to the forefront with bills in front of these government groups. So in terms of like crypto and Bitcoin and all that stuff, like I'm just thankful that there is strong encryption that does exist, and that there is strong encryption for messaging applications. So Signal, Telegram, things like that. It is interesting to kind of pair that idea that strong encryption does exist, especially for messaging, with something like WhatsApp, which bowed to pressure to kind of change its backdoor ecosystem, or at least they changed it just to be able to gather more revenue for the platform itself, for Facebook. So there's always like this give and take and this balance. And I mean, I guess just to kind of reiterate, thankful for Telegram, thankful for Signal and other applications like that. But interested to hear David's thoughts on this.
Yeah, I guess I first have a question. I don't know if we have any experts here who can speak to it, but I'm curious if anybody has any insight into how this European law actually interacts with local law. I'm not clear on the level of sort of authority that the European Congress has over, let's say, France's national policy. I don't know if anybody has any insight there.
I mean, I can try.
Yeah.
Well, this bill is more sort of permissive rather than a directive. So it basically says that companies have the right to now scan through emails, and it's not until September that they plan to revise this and perhaps add in other things, because they received some initial pushback. But again, I'm not sure how that's going to clash with local laws that maybe don't permit this sort of thing. So, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's going to be the same sort of situation as America, where you have federal law and state law. And yes, you have some divergence. You have states that are legalizing marijuana, but at the end of the day, you have the DOJ that can come in and shut businesses down, and they just wield a lot of power. So there will probably be a lot of places that will be hesitant to push back against a directive coming from Europe.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would definitely echo Will's point that, or slightly enhance Will's point to say that this definitely pushes more people towards truly encrypted communication, and hopefully drives awareness about the existence of those tools. And I think it also emphasizes something that has always been true, which is, outside of a few exceptions, never assume that anything you put on the internet is going to be private. And that's just a security mandate, which we'll talk more about cybersecurity in a minute. But I think that the real cost here, maybe the biggest downside of this sort of approach is, I hope it's not too controversial to say that law enforcement officials are just as lazy as any other human being. And the tendency here would be to rely on surveillance rather than actual investigation and law enforcement of really serious crimes like child abuse. If you get this system set up where, oh, we're just keeping an eye on everything, then you're not actually looking at the crimes. And so that's my main concern here. Obviously, privacy is the overarching concern, but if you just have this default where law enforcement wants the right to look at everything and that's its answer to crime instead of actually investigating crime, I think that the fallout from that is way bigger than just privacy. It means less enforcement.
Absolutely. And just as we wrap up, Jen, I saw your hand go up. So if you wanted to provide some final comments there.
Yeah, this story made me think, I don't know if any of you guys have ever thought, like, one day when I die and all of my loved ones get access to all of my messages and phone, what are they going to think of me? Like, are they going to have this weird window into my soul? And now the government wants that. And it just feels very weird. I don't know. But I've said so many times on this show that I think it's going to take governments to propose these bills and these laws to really force people to understand what's going on. I've often said that I think people will always choose convenience over privacy. But when we see things like this happening in various parts all over the world, I think it's really going to force people to take a second look at how they're giving away their data and look at the apps that Will has been talking about and Naomi that you've spoken about throughout the show.
Yeah, I'll just add to some up there. I'm not quite as optimistic as you. The reason why they couch it in terms of like we're protecting children is to really squash dissent in Parliament. So, you know, you're not going to have someone push back and say, well, I don't want to protect children. So by using these very triggering and emotionally charged terms, they really do stop discussions about the most effective programs for actually targeting criminals and instead just pass.
That's why we have shows like this one.